Okay, we're rolling over here. Okay, so this over here, this over here. So we're up to Reish Mem Vav. Excuse me, I think I said hey before. It's Reish Mem Vav Sif Beis. Before we read that, I wanted to. I was preparing, and I wanted to review something from Sif Aleph that the Aruch HaShulchan had said. Just find those comments. Right. So last week we had talked about the issue of borrowing, and the Shulchan Aruch had said it's mutter, and everybody agrees to this, that it's mutter to lend out for a non-Jew to borrow from you Erev Shabbos, even if you hold that the rental is not okay on Friday. It's okay if the non-Jew borrows some sort of item from you on Shabbos. We'll see now in a moment here that there's some caveats to that we'll see today, but basically borrowing is okay. And and so actually let's read the Shulchan Aruch first. Then I think there's a part here where the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan have a disagreement. But I guess actually, let's first read the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so we are up to Reish Mem Vav Sif Beis. There we go. Just get this for you, Michael. Fourth line from the top. Okay. Asur lahashil shum kli le'eno Yehudi b'Shabbos. V'afilu b'erev Shabbos im hu samach l'chashecha kol she'en shehus lahotzio mipesach beiso shom hamashil kodem chashecha mipnei hashaharoa savur sheyisrael tzivahu lahotzio. Let's translate that. It is prohibited to lend out any kind of kli, any kind of vessel to a non-Jew on Shabbos, period, according to the Shulchan Aruch. We'll see the Mishnah Berurah is going to have it'll have a kula on this. Actually, Aruch HaShulchan is a little more machmir in this particular situation. We'll see in a moment. But let's start with the assumption that there is no lending out on Shabbos of any kli, shum kli. And even if it's Erev Shabbos, if it's close to Shabbos, the onset of Shabbos, if there's not enough time for the non-Jew, the borrower, to take the item from your home, your property, then we have a problem, because people will assume, Mipnei Sheharoeh, the one who is observing this all happen, will assume that the Jew he commanded the non-Jew to take this out. And what's the problem with taking it out? You're going to be Shabbos. Okay, but the non-Jew can do whatever he wants. It's not Shabbos for him. People will think that you're doing it. Telling him wherefore, what's the problem with I told him to take it away from me? Well, you couldn't do it yourself. Why can't I do it myself? Because it's the same. Okay, good. There's no heter to carry, and there's Rishus Harabim. Okay, good. This is what we're going to discuss a little bit. We're going to actually talk a little about Eruv today. This is the approach of the Smag and Sefer HaTruma. That the reason for this prohibition of not lending on Shabbos or close to Shabbos is because people who see it will think that the Jew commanded this to be. It's Marisayan rearing its ugly head again. Yeah. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan points this out. I can't remember when I was preparing the Beis Yosef. He he mentions this there too. I don't recall now, so my apologies. Actually, I think he does. The Rambam has a different reason for this. It's not the Mechaber doesn't quote it here, but the Rambam has a different reason for this. So I'm just going to read to you what the Aruch HaShulchan's quotation of the Rambam. V'hatam kasav harambam sham dekashe yotze beis hayisrael b'Shabbos yireh kemo shelova lo o mashkeno o pasakimo o machar lo b'Shabbos. He says it's not that it looks like you commanded him to violate the Isser of Hotzah. I mean, you could do it, so you told him to do the Hotzah. The Rambam says it looks like you actually made business with him. Now he's walking out with the merchandise. He's walking out with the whatever on Shabbos. Whoa, what are they doing there? Did he have a little transaction? So it is a Maris Ayin concern, but he gives a slightly different Maris Ayin concern, and this may lead to a slightly different conclusion with regard to the question of the Eruv. So let's talk about the Eruv a little bit now. Let's read the Mishnah Berurah, and then we'll come back and we'll read the continuation of the Aruch HaShulchan in just a moment. The Mishnah Berurah says on the words Shum Kli, Sifkat and Vav, Hainu afilu kelim she'ein osim b'hem malacha. We're talking about all kelim, even the ones that you don't do malacha with. Your paperweight. You can't lend out your paperweight on Shabbos. V'af asur afilu dei harishon, even according to the Rif from the Rambam, who said there's no problem on Friday of even renting it out. They didn't hold of that brisa. That was the Beis Shammai brisa. We don't hold of the Beis Shammai brisa. So even kelim that you don't do malacha with, even according to the first opinion, you cannot lend out on Shabbos. Again, why? Why? But both of these reasons seem to apply on Shabbos. One, it either looks like you're doing business. They walk out with the paperweight on. He must have bought the paperweight, or he's paying for the paper or something. Or the second reason is maybe the Jew, Dafka, wanted it to be moved out of his house on Shabbos. He wanted it to go from here to over there. He wanted to just get it out of here. And now he basically asked the non-Jew, to do for him what he couldn't do, which was Hotzah, taking something out into the Rishus Harabim, into the public domain, and carrying it. Okay, so now let's look at Zayin. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos imhu v'chulei v'chulei. So even if it's close to Shabbos, it's a problem if you can't get it out of the house in time. V'osra az afilu limkor lo o litein lo b'matana. It is prohibited to sell it to him or to give it to him and as a gift, as a matana. It's not okay if it's too close to Shabbos. Or just in general, by the way, to even give this as a matana on Shabbos to the non-Jew is a problem. And he says that we'll talk about this more in Rishon and Beis, and he says, look at what I wrote over there. If you look at Rishon and Beis, you don't have it in front. You don't think I made enough copies all the way up to there. But if you look at Rishon and Beis, it talks about right before Shabbos or on Shabbos, that's mutar limkol ena yehudi lahatino samuch lachashecha. You can make the business transaction before dark, before Shabbos. He says over there in the Shulchan Aruch that you have to get it out. And then there's some kulas. Some say it's okay if you are miyached the space in your house. So it was like the chametz, when you sell the chametz, you sell the cabinet also along with it, wherever the chametz is. So same thing. Maybe you sell your miyached, that space now belongs to the non-Jew, and then if he comes to pick it up, so he's not taking out of my space, he's taking out of his. So there's some kulas that exist. But for the most part, we try to avoid this because it gives off an impression that it is okay, that there was even if it's a matana, it gives off the matana as a gift. It gives off an impression of business was done here, or that he commanded him to move it in the Rishus Harabim.
I don't think it's so bad to lend it out prior to Shabbos, but the bringing it back is even worse.
On Shabbos. So good. So excellent, Michael. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Excellent. That's going to become an issue with the next part when we talk about lending out or renting out your animal to the non-Jew. We're going to come to your point exactly. Okay, very good. So Kodem Chashecha, next comment in the Mishnah Berurah, Kodem Chashecha, Hainu Kodem Shetishka Hachama. Doesn't mean Tzeisa Kochavim. Wants to clarify, we're talking about Shkia. Okay, sunset. Tzivahu lahotzio. Well, I'm not even sure why that the whole kodem chashecha. I don't know why. It could mean earlier than shkia. If you accept Shabbos beforehand, it doesn't make a difference. Except maybe I thought, well, but maybe for other people you accepted Shabbos early, so maybe people won't make the assumption because they'll say, hey, he didn't accept Shabbos early. So maybe if you accept Shabbos early, you can get away with this because people won't assume all these bad things about you. Maybe that's the diuk, the inference we can make from this. Okay. Sivahu lahotzio. Test Sivahu lahotzio. That the people, all the onlookers, will say that he commanded him to take it lachutz l'reshus harabim, to go outside in the reshus harabim in the public domain, which is problematic to carry there. Va'afilu l'didan. Now here he talks about the eruv. Va'afilu l'didan the less lan reshus harabim gemura. I'm sorry. Before we get to the eruv, we don't have reshus harabim daraisas today. Maybe we live closest to the closest one that could be, though. If you've ever been to Manhattan for Shabbos and you've carried, your assumption is that it's not a Reshus Harabim D'Oraisa. Eruv doesn't help with Reshus Harabim D'Oraisa. If it's a place where 600,000 people traverse that particular road, there is no Eruv in the world that can help you because that is prohibited to carry in such a public space. That's based on the travels and the travels of the Jewish people in the desert.
The population is over 1 million.
Right. So the question is always about Broadway. Does the street of Broadway have 600,000 people that traverse it on any given day? I forget where the big post came from. Rav Moshe thought it was a problem. I think he wasn't a fan of the Manhattan Eruv, but there were other posts who felt it was sufficient. So that's also a question exactly. So in Washington Heights, it's a less traversed part of Broadway than in Times Square, where you're getting tourists and business people, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's 100%. It's a whole sugya about the 600,000 people and the Manhattan Eruv.
Is it males or females?
I think people. I think everybody.
Age matters?
No. Just
No, you can't if it's a child below 12 or
Doesn't
13.
Doesn't matter.
It's all the same.
I mean,
People.
Are we talking about carrying?
Yes.
So even though I'm learning this, so even if a child is carrying, it's below 12. to
That's a
13?
question of can you tell your child to carry? The answer is no. If they do it on their own, that's another sin, and we'll get to at the end of Hilchot Shabbat about your children doing things.
That's the two things.
But in terms of the definition, so once you have a reshus harabim gemura, like a real reshus harabim, then this whole question, that's when we're talking about this is prohibited, right? But he says, even according to us, we don't have these kind of reshus harabim. We have what we call a karmelis. A karmelis, it looks and it smells like a reshus harabim, but it's not considered a reshus harabim d'oraisa. It's a karmelis. We'll call it a rabbinic. It's a rabbinic. Second noise.
Somebody trying to pop in?
This is,
Hey, wait a minute. You want to?
it's okay. It's good. It's good for the microphone. Okay. Sorry. So even according to us, who we don't have a reshus harabim d'oraisa, it's still prohibited to tell the non-Jew that he'll take it out on Shabbos, etc. The amiru la'eno Yehudi shivvasu afil v'mila derabanan. Meaning, we say that the isser, the prohibition of amira la'nochri, telling a non-Jew to do something that you're not allowed to do, applies even by rabbinic halachos, not just by the doraisas of Shabbos, but even by the derabanans of Shabbos. And therefore, even though telling them to carry in the reshus harabim that's derabanan, it's already a derabanan, and you have a derabanan on that. We don't say that if just because you have two derabanans that it's mutter. Now, what we're going to see at various points when we're studying Hilchot Shabbos, that if you do have a double derabanan, a derabanan pilot on derabanan like this, that b'mokom mitzvah, when there's a mitzvah involved in this situation, we're going to be mekil. And when there is a tzorech gadol, how you define a great need is of course a question, but then there will be a heter. But we don't outright say there's a heter just because it's a derabanan on a derabanan. Okay, so that's this situation of the non-Jew telling the non-Jew which is already a rabbinic prohibition, to do something that's rabbinically prohibited, you cannot do that. Now he says here, "V'im kain," if this is true, im ha'ir mukefes choma, you have a walled city or you have an eruv. Okay, walled city is the easiest way to put up an eruv. It's that's like kind of what Rabbi Jachter likes to call eruv nirvana. It's like an eruv that you don't have to really check. It's just always there. You know? It's great. Okay, so the mutala taltel bakula, you could carry in that space. Let's say the non-Jew lives in that town, within the eruv. He lives within the eruv. So you're not, even if people saw it, they wouldn't. What are they going to say? Oh, he told them to carry it in the rishus. No, it's not rishus rabba. It's mutter to carry. So then, what does he say? Shari lahashilo kalim she'ein osim elacha b'hem. You can lend out to your non-Jewish friends and neighbors vessels that are not used for malacha. It's fine. They come over on Shabbos. Can I borrow your fill in the blank? It's not a plow. It's not a whatever. Sure. Of course, here, take it. Go ahead, not a problem at all. Because why? No one's going to say that, oh, he told them to carry the shushan, because that's not a problem in this situation. But he says, though, Belim korlo ulahaskiro, but to sell it to him or to rent it out to him, aser af bazer, that's problematic for a different reason, because that's business on Shabbos. You're making money on this. And so that transaction on Shabbos is not prohibited, is not permitted. Shelo yomru shemachar vehiskir lo b'Shabbos. So they don't say shelo yomru shemachar vehiskir lo b'Shabbos. Oh, we're not worried. We're not worried when we lend it out to somebody. They say, oh, sure, you want to borrow it? Go ahead. We're not worried that people are going to say, oh, when he walks away with it, he bought that or he rented that. What is he doing? We're not worried about that. So therefore, the borrowing is fine. Actually renting it or buying it is problematic. But the borrowing is okay. Now, if the kalim are used for malacha, suddenly they're walking out of your house with a plow. So that's the afilu hashilo also. Then to lend that out is also problematic. Unless they get it out of your house before Shabbos or your property before Shabbos. We're not concerned that people are going to say that he's doing it as the shaliach, since it's borrowing. As we talked about in the previous sif, borrowing is not something that there's no money transaction. People are not going to see the back and forth of the money. Let's talk about the Aruch HaShulchan here for a moment now. By the way, it's very practical halacha. You have a neighbor comes to your door, and they knock on your door. I don't know how practical this is. And they ask you, can I borrow this? They can't find it. They need it. So now comes the question. They come over to your house and they say, can I borrow the screwdriver? So now, based on what we learned, it's not so posh to say you can lend out the screwdriver, because the screwdriver is klish osabah malacha. That's, you're being tikkun mona. But
in a practical world, it's a difficult.
Right. So now you have to also weigh the question of is there Dr. Shalom that needs to be involved in this? That suddenly you say on Shabbos, you say no, you can't borrow my screwdriver. The best thing to do is to say, I don't know where my screwdriver is, something like that, and say I'll look for it. I'm sorry, I can't find it. And then first thing after Shabbos over, you say you come over, knock on the door, I found it. I don't know. It's difficult, but that would be, if you're applying this as is written, that would be the halacha. Now, again, if it's a kli that they say, oh, can I come over and borrow the salt shaker? Which I don't know anybody that's doing that except for the stories of Lot. That's fine. That's fine. It's not, nobody's going to be worried that you sold it or anything like that. The Aruch HaShulchan here points out that according to the Rambam. Remember, the Rambam wasn't about, because of the Hotzah issue, the Rambam thought it looks like an actual transaction. Right. So according to him, Lefizeh, our Chashulchan writes, Gam ba'ir sheyesh sham eruv u'muter l'tautel it's aser, which makes sense according to that reasoning. And therefore, you actually get a different conclusion if you follow the Rambam's reasoning as opposed to the Sefer Truma. though the Mechaber quotes this one. The Aruch HaShulchan's personal conclusion is Mikol Makom Yesh Lachush Lidvarav for the Rambam. So you should be careful for the Rambam. You should only be lenient when there is a really a great need. Anyways, if it's obvious to everybody that what's happening here is borrowing, then it's okay according to the Rambam. Even I guess if certain things are not things you would buy, but a salt shaker, you're not going to come over and buy the salt shaker. It's obvious that it's a situation of borrowing, then it would be okay, even according to the Rambam. Okay.
I mean, but the reasoning in the Mishnah Berurah just doesn't make any sense.
Explain.
Well, you have
Yom Mukefet Choma, yeah.
Right, so you can carry. So that's not an issue about telling them. So then he
Right.
says, but you can't sell it to them or rent it to them.
On Shabbos. Meaning the actual transaction happens on Shabbos.
Right. No. Yeah, but how do you know? I mean, that's my point. Is that he walks out with the screwdriver, or not screwdriver. He walks out with the paperweight.
Right.
That's okay because there's not
Right.
carrying.
Right. But if
you don't know whether.
Right, did he sell it to them? Right. I hear your point. How you know?
But
How would you know that? How would you know that's the case that you could do that? Yeah.
I mean, unless you're in the business of selling paperweights, so somebody would assume if somebody walked out of your house with a paperweight that they bought it.
Right.
or using it for the desk, like they have paperweights for the desk. But
Yeah.
also, but
Well,
it's
just
a
the question
screw,
here,
but
what it
the,
looks like.
but
And
the
it looks the same, no matter what you did.
Right. So it's interesting here. That's why it's in this last line that the Aruch HaShulchan threw in. It's like if it's the kind of thing that people would borrow, then it's fine. Meaning, kind of they maybe go case by case on the actual item, right? If it's the kind of thing that's normally you come over and you borrow it. This is not. You wouldn't for one-time usage. You wouldn't borrow it or rent it from the person. So then that plays into it. You're right that there's a little bit of a indefined piece here.
but the screwdriver can be used for any. The screwdriver can be used in any way.
Yeah. So
The screwdriver can be used in any way because you can have. I can loan it to you. You could be using it in a house for something. On whatever day, let's say on the Shabbos. I'm not saying you personally. And then there's the business thing where somebody needs another screwdriver or whatever, and he asks you for it. Yeah. You don't know what to do. So according to what the rabbi is saying, he can't do it. He's got to wait until the next day or in the evening when after Shabbos is done.
yeah. Okay.
It's very time. The rabbis have a very bad.
I think the worst of us.
They wouldn't say they don't give you.
Yeah, it's interesting how here, dealing with a derabanan and a derabanan, and they're very machmir here not machmir, but they're very stringent when it comes to this idea of people doing something wrong and people think you did an issa derabanan wrong. It's interesting.
Yeah, but the general assumption is that they're going to think bad things immediately.
Right. Yeah.
They don't give you the benefit of a doubt.
Yeah, and it's interesting here when it comes to Hilchot Shabbat here, what we've sort of seen since we started learning Hilchot Shabbat, this is applied this is applied here more than any other area of halacha that I've come across, which may speak to the importance of the pristine nature, the perception of the pristine nature of Shabbos, that we don't want people violating it because it denigrates the feel of the day. But your point is well taken. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Sifkim for a few minutes, and then we'll stop. Here we get into a different. It's related, but now we're adding a new complicated piece to it. And I maybe mentioned this a few weeks ago already, and we we talked about till now shvisas kalim, essentially. That's sort of the issue in the background. That your kalim, is there a command for them to not do work on Shabbos or not? And the answer is, according to the base Hillel, we paskin like it's okay if your kalim do work on Shabbos. You can't do work with the kalim on Shabbos, but the kalim can do work on Shabbos. What about your animal? Here it gets very, very. It's very clear what the answer is. So let's look at Gimel. Osir lahaskir o lahashil behimto le'eno Yehudi k'dei sheyaseh b'malacha b'Shabbos. Now we're all thinking here in 2021, living in Scarsdale, New York. Okay, how practical is this? But understand that for many Jews in our history, this was a serious way of parnasa. Was through your animal. Your animal worked. Your animal has value, so you will rent it out to somebody else. You make money off of that. And so what we're told here is that it's prohibited to rent out or to lend out your behema, your animal, to a non-Jew in order for them to do work on Shabbos. Now let's quickly clarify here, and I think I'm glad that Mishnah Berurah did this. Look at Kadesh Yaseh v'chulei Yud Aleph. He says Tzarich Lamar Shema Yaseh. What he really means is that because perhaps the non-Jew will do the work with the animal on Shabbos. That's what's really problematic here.
Well, wait, an animal cannot work on Shabbos.
She'adam mitzuve al shvisas be'amtov. I own the animal. It's my animal. My animal cannot do malacha on Shabbos.
Right.
Not just that, I didn't do it. I didn't carry it. I put it on the back of my dog, and the dog carried it in the Rosh Hashanah. So I didn't do the malacha. No. I'm sorry. The dog also can't carry.
Right.
If it's your dog, it couldn't be more clear. Also, why is this the case? Take a look at.
What if it's somebody else's dog? It still can't do it.
We're going to talk about that case as well. It's a problem as well, but less maybe of a problem, but it's still a problem. Okay, let's take a look at Yud quickly before we look at Yud Beis. Asr lahaskir v'chulei afilu b'yom rishon, even on Sunday. Afilu b'havla. I didn't sell it just for Shabbos. It's a havla arrangement, and I did it on Sunday. I cannot rent or lend out my animal because maybe they're going to use it on Shabbos to do malacha, and it's my animal. My animal cannot do work on Shabbos.
What did they rented them out for the weekdays?
So good. So that's one of the ways you could do this. So look at Yud Beis here for a second about Shvisas Behemto. How do I know you can't? My animal can't do work. It says in next week's parsha by Schanan in the 10 Commandments. It says this. Why you have to keep Shabbos? Your animals have to rest. What do you mean? I rented it out. It's not mine. It's in his reshus. It's in the non-Jews. No, schirus lokanya. Schirus does not. The way I like to explain it is like transfer the title of the item. It gives them rights to it, but it's still yours. When we look at when we go to the city hall and we look at who's the owner, you're the owner. It's a Jewish animal, a Jewish owned animal, and it's commanded that it needs to rest, this animal.
You have no ownership. Today's equivalent to car rental, car lease.
Right.
You don't own it.
Right. The dealer owns it, right? Or the bank owns it, whatever it is. Yeah. There are those who say but we say schirus rental agreement is kone, does transfer title l'chumra. Meaning, this goes to your point a moment ago, Tommy. Let's say a Jew rents an animal from the non-Jew. So you say, here's a workaround heter. I'll have him do malacha. He's not my animal. I rented him. No. We say schirus kanya l'chumra, meaning that you rented it out. So maybe you are indeed the owner. So mitzuva al shvisasa. Therefore, that animal that you rented, you are obligated to ensure that it does not do malach. But nachom hachmir kevan dehu iser d'oraisa. And since we're talking about iser d'oraisa here, till now we're talking about the Rabbanans and we're talking about Isser D'Oraisa. If your animal does work, it's on you, Midoraisa, that animal did malacha. So therefore, we're machmir on both sides here. Whether you rented it or you're lending it out, you have to make sure it doesn't do malacha. But here's one case where you can be lenient. You rented it from a non-Jew. You turn around and lend it out to a non-Jew.
Mhm.
That if that animal does malacha, that's fine manashach. Because if schirus is kanya, so great. So then not the last guy here, that's his. If schirus is not kanya, so then it's the first guy's. I'm just the middle guy. So mimanashach, that's okay if that animal works, but that's one case where you could pull it off. Or machar le'eno Yehudi v'mashicha l'chud, or b'kesef l'chud. Have a sveka l'dina v'azlin l'chumra l'in shvisas behema. As I talked about with regards to selling chametz, kinyonim with a non-Jew, not simple. What works, what doesn't work. The Gemara doesn't talk about it. So if you're just going to do one kinyon, you make you buy it or you sell it with just mashicha, where you pull the animal, or with just money. So now you have a sveka in suffix and a din. Does it work or not? It does not work, and so therefore we need to be machmir that maybe you still own it, the behema, and therefore you have to make sure when you really sell the animal, you make all the kinyonim, so that you ensure that the animal is truly out of your hands. Same way that we do it with chametz on Erev Pesach. Okay, we'll stop here. This is obviously this is a lengthy topic, and we're going to talk a lot about it. Shvisas behema is, seems again impractical because we're not farmers. Though I don't know if anybody here has a dog. Anybody here have a dog? Okay, no one here has a dog. So, but if you have a dog or you have another animal, now it comes to the question. Particularly if you lived in a place where there's no eruv. The question, how can you take the dog for a walk? And it's a whole to-do. Are you pulling the dog? Is the dog pulling itself? Can you have a leash on the dog? Anyways, so there are a lot of things, interesting things you could talk about here. But it's an important issue to talk about, and it's an issue